This podcast with director Jeffrey Walker is brought to you by JMC Academy, Australia's leading creative education provider. With degrees in film, acting, entertainment management, design, music, audio engineering, animation, and game design, JMC has a course for every type of creative. Search JMC Academy to learn more. And you can stream Jeffrey Walker's TV series The Artful Dodger on Disney Plus now. Hello and welcome to the Variety Australia podcast. I am your host, Poppy Reid, and today's episode features a truly exceptional guest, Jeffrey Walker. He is a trailblazing director and producer, and his career began as a child actor and evolved into directing, earning him widespread acclaim. His directorial brilliance has been recognised with numerous awards, including the AFI Young Actors Award and multiple Australian Directors Guild Awards. Known for his work on the recent Artful Dodger, which I have been binge watching on Disney, Modern Family, another show that is my favourite, and Young Rock, incredible show. Jeff's remarkable contributions to both Australian and international cinema have me very, very excited to have this chat today here at JMC Academy in Melbourne in front of a live audience. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Poppy.
I want to go all the way back to when you were 9 years old and you were cast as the beloved Bronson in Round the Twist. Firstly, what was that experience like, and how did that background in acting, and especially as a young person, influence your approach to directing? And then I've got another question around that, but I don't want to put too many questions into one question.
In the first. Well,
yeah.
By the time that I was, pardon me, when I was doing Round the Twist, I was 9 years old. I think I'd been acting for 2 years by then, so I felt like a seasoned pro, starting at 7. And I'd worked on another couple of kids shows, but the thing with Round the Twist is that it was the audition that I did was for the second season. So the first season I'd watched at home with my sister and absolutely loved on. It was on like Sunday morning on Channel 7. We'd wake up and watch it and absolutely love it. And then like a couple of years later, I was, the original Bronson had grown too old to play to play Bronson, and so I was able to go in and audition and do it. And it was just an amazing experience, beautiful scripts and great people. And it's just one of those rare things that all these years later now, 30-something years later, it still comes back and comes up in conversation. And it's just one of those never-ending, pieces that I've been a part of, I guess. And I think even next year they're doing a musical version of it live on stage, which is
are you involved?
Crazy. No, I don't think I could play the dad maybe now or something. I'm not sure. but yeah, so it was just one of those. Yeah, it was one of those really lucky ones to have been a part of. I remember, I think on seasons 3 and 4, the Queen visited the set, and it had this sort of odd kind of young. Now it's very retro and kind of people haven't thought about it in 20 years. They hear the theme song, it comes back up in their head. So, so it certainly launched. In terms of the next, I guess, 6 or 7 years, the time that I spent acting as a young teenager and so on, it was the project that, kind of kept me busy all that time. But I definitely, as you were sort of alluding to, I was really in a state of training from a very young age for what I wanted to do, which was work behind the scenes. I wasn't sure exactly as what, but I knew that, I loved acting, but I was, really keen to sort of move behind the camera. And so I treated my 10 years as a young actor until the age of 17 as an apprenticeship for, to become a director.
Secretly doing an apprenticeship.
That's it.
And did it change the way that you now work with young actors and child actors? Like, I guess that experience and being on the front end of the camera, how did that change the way that you deal with those types of actors behind the camera?
Yeah, I've got young kids as well. So, like in terms of being on set, it's sort of the immediacy of dealing with young people and all that kind of stuff is my day-to-day life as well. So, that probably is more present because you just sort of know the natural sort of rhythms that a kid who's 10 or, whatever has, and kind of when they'd get tired and when they'd be on their game and what sort of emotion they might be trying to access to, perform a scene and so on. And I do think I probably got, a sense of what it is like to be on set, how much fun it can be, how much... it's a real high to be on set because it's really exciting. And as a kid, you feel like, oh, that could just keep going forever. And that not for everyone it can. So I think I'm very sort of sensitive to the fact that it's an amazing, incredible experience when you're there and you've got to sort of, make them feel like they're supported, and that their identity isn't completely wrapped up in that, and that beyond that, they're still going to have a great time in their life and other things. So there is a sort of a bigger consciousness that sometimes comes in when I'm working with young actors. On The Clearing recently, we had lots of young kids, who were in a cult, and it was really like, it was a high sort of drama and a very stressful sort of psychological thriller. And the key to that one was just, to get the kids in last minute and shoot the scenes that were quite stressful to film, then go back to the nice, light, fun set as quick as possible, get them off set again, and that was it, So I'm sort of always trying to work out ways to make it, enjoyable and make sure we also get the performances we need to get as well.
Yeah, so there's a psychological safety thing that you need to be aware of, I guess, with these kids. And then also you mentioned making sure that they're not tying their identity to the identity of their character in a way. How does that work when you're on set?
Well, I think that, like from a very young age, they all sort of appreciate that they're using their imagination and that they're pretending and that they're acting and all that kind of stuff, and the young fellow that I'm working with at the moment is only like 5 years old, and he's cheeky and fun like every 5-year-old, but he really understands. Like some kids, I would never say action because then they start acting and it gets all weird and not real. This little one, he, you say action, he slides into his character, and if he's got to be mean, he's got to be this, he's got to be happy, he's got to wrestle, he's got to remember a certain thing. He's unbelievable. So, and I always try to work with a dramaturg on set as well, someone who's because I'm busy doing lots of stuff, and they kids need that nice continuity of somebody who's always with them, and so I can sort of if I'm getting through, it's great, and then I can go and whisper to Greg Saunders, who's terrific, been doing it for 20 odd years or something. I can go, yeah, let's try this or try that, and then he'll just do a little whisper, and he gets the sort of the
what's their role called? A
dramaturg.
TURG? Mm-hmm. What is this?
So they work on grown up movies too, and so basically not to say that some directors aren't, performance directors. Sometimes they're busy or whatever. But if you've got to build an ensemble, then you might get effectively like someone to come in, and it's like, you're studying acting again. So, instead of it just being like, okay, there's the page, there's the scene, you're going to sit over there and do this. It's like, let's do some homework on this thing and let's try some improv, and who are these characters? And so it gives an opportunity during a rehearsal process that sometimes the director's busy, location scouting and doing other things. It's an opportunity for the ensemble to spend time together. It's not really common on an adult film set, but it does happen, and it happens in rehearsal periods for films quite a bit. But certainly for kids, having someone basically like a drama coach effectively there to help them do it. I mean, my thing is like with kids, I don't want their parents to ever run the lines with them. That's not their role at all. I don't want kind of smile, you're on camera. I don't want any of that stuff. I just always say to the parents, all you've got to do is be there for a hug and a paddle and a chat and that kind of stuff, and we'll take care of everything else. Teach them the lines as late as possible so they're not like learning them and sounding like a robot and all that kind of stuff. Or sometimes I'll just stand by the camera and say the line, they repeat it back, and we get it and we move on. So there's like a million little techniques I'm trying to employ to get that sort of naturalistic performance.
And being a dad would help too. It
does.
Yeah.
Yes, because I got all the little ones. And I was thinking the other day, I saw our little 5-year-old on set. I was like, I wonder how I get my 5-year-old to do any of this stuff. And
why have you never brought them in?
It's coming. My middle boy, who is 8 and looks exactly like I did in Round the Twist, a shock of red hair and all this sort of stuff. He's like, Dad, I'd like to be in your movies now. I'm like, okay, pressure's on now.
You're like, I know a guy. Maybe
that's it. Yeah.
And there's another, talking about the dramaturg, there was another thing that I learned about recently, which is the director's attachment. Mm-hmm. So a director who can shadow you, but they're not a director yet. And it's something that not every director does. It's actually quite a beautiful contribution to our emerging professionals within the industry. And it's something that you do.
And something that I have done many times over. And in the audience today is Peter Dodds, who produced Neighbours. And the very first attachment that I did was to do 2 blocks on Neighbours with a mentor director. And that mentor director, because of the way they shoot that show, is 5 episodes per block. In the first block that I shadowed, I was able to direct a whole episode of that show. And the scenes are spread out over the days of the shoot, so you're just dropping in and doing a scene every now and then. And on the second block, I went through that attachment program, through Film Vic at that stage, I was able to do 2 episodes. So suddenly I had 3 episodes, and Peter could make the decision, all right, we'll take a chance on you and you can come and direct. So
Shout out to Peter.
Shout out to Peter. So yeah, and I've since then, even when I've worked in the States, when I did Modern Family, I was booked to work on it, but I shadowed on it before I came out and attached myself to another director and asked a million questions and sat on set and watched it all. And then when you start, you know a little more about it. And similarly now, with, I would say probably, I think every project, or even not, every other, it feels like every project, there's a director's attachment who comes through and work with them, and that sometimes it's kind of, it's mostly observational. I'm not always able to give over scenes and stuff because everyone's very precious because of the I guess the budget range and the stuff that we're making and so on. But in pre-production, they're able to see how all the meetings work. They're able to look at if they've worked a little bit in film. Normally the attachments have done something. They've either made a short, they've worked a little bit in, they've just started working in television or something, and they're witnessing maybe a scale of production production they haven't seen before. And so, you're sort of hopefully arming them with what should be the last port of call before taking whatever that next step may be.
So, for anyone in the audience that might want to become a director's attachment, how do you do it? How could they possibly be given, that kind of gift that you were given?
Well, there's like official ones through all of the state funding bodies. Sometimes the Australian Directors Guild will do them. There might be some initiatives through Screen Australia as well. There's a lot of qualifying things that are kind of really annoying to people because they read them and they go like, oh, how do I get that experience? You want me to have experience, but I need this to get that experience. So there is a rigmarole, like all those bureaucracies and all this, the funding body things, but they do create opportunities and they get behind people and champion them, and it's competitive and it's stressful and all those things to compete, to get those ops. And so, but if you can persevere and keep chatting to whatever the state funding bodies are, they are there, for you and for us as filmmakers, and they're used to getting bugged by people who, want to get that break. And so there's a million things on the website about it, and you can call them and email them and do all those things. But there's a lot of qualifying things that you have to meet before you can sort of be in consideration.
I love that that's the process, and it's not it's who you know kind of thing. Like,
no,
do you have a mate that's a director, or like that's a very common thing within the music industry. It is very much a who you know industry, and a lot of interns will.
And we do unofficial. Like I'll always I've got lots of friends who are like, hey, when you're shooting this next thing, can I come and visit? Maybe they've worked in other departments, grip or whatever it might be, and they're like, I want to start directing stuff. I'm like, we'll come visit anytime. We hang out on set for a week, and we do those ones as well, where helping a friend out. But the official ones are very official, and you have to have the runs on the board, so to speak.
And probably when you learn the most as well, because
absolutely. And also, it's when you put it on your CV, everyone knows. I know if I see that on a CV, they've had to vie really hard to get it. And that's, I guess, the thing of, the funding bodies are sort of everyone who receives funding for anything in any capacity. Everyone knows that they've been vetted and gone through a big process to achieve that. So you can go, I did that, and you go, oh, I can instantly see the 6 months of work that it took to make that happen. And and that's something to be respected and appreciated.
And you mentioned Modern Family just a little bit before. You've also done Young Rock. You were also the executive producer on Amy Poehler's Difficult People to... You've had some really impressive credits in the US. How did you break the US?
Well, the first time I went over there, I think that because I'd started acting as a kid, and I and I really viewed the film industry as, it was like going to be a lifelong pursuit. And I would have viewed it as a young person, with being besotted by, big Hollywood directors and Hollywood in general, as Hollywood was like, going to the Olympics, is that you can compete in every other track meet in the world, but until you go to the Olympics and figure out, can you compete at that level? For me, I had sort of Hollywood put on that sort of level. So it wasn't so much like, I've got this film that, I've got to go over and take my story, my unique voiceover. I was just like, I've got to go to Hollywood. It's just as simple as that dream, because it started when I was 7 or 8 years old, right? And so, so I was trying to make choices of projects that would, help that journey, and just sort of work out whether it was, somewhere that I could work and prove myself and all those sort of things. And then I went over and I tried to take a few meetings with agents, but I had a list of shows that at that time, very different now, but at that time, Australian shows really weren't travelling to the States, so they could watch it, but they probably didn't know if it was the best show or the worst show being made in Australia. It was like, yeah, that's pretty good, maybe. What else is coming out of there? So, so then eventually it sort of built that there was, more things that had a tiny bit more currency. Eventually, one agent, took a chance on me, and
who was that agent?
So I'm still with him now. It's Michael Pio, and they're at Innovative Artists, which is kind of like there's like 3 or 4 very big agencies, and they'd be like the agencies below them, and they're terrific. And they they work with crews, and they have a big literary department. They have fabulous actors as well, and all that kind of stuff. But they were definitely in that sort of like I always I don't know if he likes this comparison or not, but Michael really had to be a door-to-door shampoo salesman, to convincing people to get something that they had no idea that they needed, really, because
that's who you need, an advocate. Like
absolutely.
that.
And he had to really go to work. And traditionally, agents are wonderful at managing offers, but I was not in that space at all. It was like he had to convince people to meet. Why would I meet with this person? He just kept working and working and working and working. And then eventually, someone took the time to watch all the material and everything, and then I did a lot of work at 20th. For 8 or 9 years before COVID and stuff. It just was, a nice busy time.
And you were based there?
I would come and go, you know, so, because I was always making projects back in Australia as well. And so the projects that I make in the States often is short, to do Modern Family is only 8 days. It was 3 days of prep. and you shoot, the next week, and then if you want to fly back home, or whatever. So sometimes I go over and string a few things together. Sometimes I go, oh, I'm in post-production, and if I had a kind Australian producer, I'd say, listen, can I sneak over to the States and work on this show I really love? And they're like, yeah, go on. And so I'd disappear for a couple of weeks and come back. And yeah, but I did when I was doing the Amy Poehler show, Difficult People in New York. That was the most consistent. We were living in New York for 4 months at a time because it was a big one. We're directing 10 episodes of a show at once. So and what that meant was that we could go to fabulous big guest actors, that were friends of the showrunners and that they'd worked with and collaborated with, and say, is there one day in the next 5 months you could give us on the show? It's a very hard thing to say no to. So, suddenly, Julianne Moore would turn up, or Martin Short, all these fabulous people. So it was a very, very special, 3 years making that show.
Amazing. And what I find really interesting about you, Jeff, is that, yes, you've built all these relationships in the US. If you wanted to be based there, if you wanted to raise your children there, you absolutely could. But you've chosen no. You want to be based in Australia, and you largely want to work on Australian productions at the moment anyway. Why is that?
Well, I think I've never left, even though I'd leave for little passages of time. I mean, I've grown up in this film business, and it's shaped who I am, so it's, and it's, I love Australia, and I love, living where we live, and all that kind of stuff is really, the quality of life for my family is very important, as it is for all, mums and dads and stuff. So, we feel really happy here. And I would say too that the quality of both scripts now in the last few years as well, budgets and actors, is there's nowhere in the world that I would be offered, a better combo of those things. And, as recently as The Dodger, with our 3 leads in that, if you were making that show in any budget range anywhere in the world for any studio or network or whatever, you would cast the exact same people. So suddenly you're like, yeah, well, what would possibly drive me, to go and do this anywhere else? So, and I love Australian crews, and I just feel really happy here. And the projects are traveling; they're all traveling around the world, both Dodger and The Clearing, on Hulu in the US. And so there's not this barrier where you make it here and, let's hope a few 100,000 people see it. And that's the hope that, I had for a long time when I was working on Australian projects. And nowadays it's the sky's the limit, for these shows. And you get to showcase all of your fabulous Australian buddies and collaborators' work to the world, and so I'm chuffed to be here doing it.
It's such a beautifully shot series as well. It's when you watch it, you're like, this is a global cinematic experience. However, it's soundtracked by these incredible Aussie hits as well. You've got Jet in there, you've got The Living End in there. It's amazing. You've got Wolf Mother as the opening track. I love that. I'm so interested to know though, how do you compare making a series in Australia to making a series in the US? How do those two industries, when it comes to making a series, differ?
Well, the biggest difference, the most intimidating part of working in the States is the drive up. So in one or two ways, if you're on location, you drive past blocks of trucks, city blocks full of trucks, and they're all there to make the show. And I'm just dying 1,000 deaths and stressed, and all of this is, oh my God, and what does everyone do? And it's going to be big, and all this money, and so that, or if you drive onto a studio lot, as again, if I go back to this little kid, all he wanted to do was was to work in Hollywood, and you drive onto those classic Hollywood lots. Doesn't matter. I did it, every day that I was over there. I worked on so many things for 20 years, but every day I drove up to the security and under the big, the big archway that you drive under, heart starts racing every single day. So that stuff is nerve-wracking. But by the time you actually get on set, it's exactly the same, because you look around, there's your actors, first AD, DP, myself. That's it. So all of that layer that stresses me out, that's all there, and it's making the machine work. But ultimately, the process of achieving the scene, whatever the goal of that scene is, or both visually, performance-wise, and everything else, is identical. And suddenly you just relax, and then you're back into your happy place. And working with actors and talented cinematographers and so on. So so that's where it all sort of you can take a breath again, and it feels very much like home.
Do you have a bit of imposter syndrome? I wonder, when I imagine you coming up and you're seeing all this, these trucks and this very grand vision of what a US production looks like, a lot of that has to to do with, I guess, imposter syndrome in a way. Like,
everyone in my business
can
has
you
it.
not look at your awards? Like, I
No,
mean,
it
3
means
actor
nothing.
awards, 6 Directors Guild awards, 15 nominations for directorial works. Come on, Jeff.
No, it never leaves you, ever. Because I've
Okay.
got people that I look up to and I go, I could never do what they do. And, we're doing the same job. And I look at them and just go, oh, they're just so talented. I can't believe it, And I joke with my showrunner I'm working with at the moment. I'm just, like any time they do something, they have to correct something, which is great. And that's what they're there for. They're helping me, tell the story. Is I just go, oh, here we go. We're going to call that director's going to start tomorrow. I'm out, So, you always feel like, to stay relevant as a director and to keep, doing things is really hard, and as you sort of, you get older, you sort of go, okay, well, what I don't have is probably the freshness of voice that inevitably I had when I was 25. It just can't be there. So now, how do you stay relevant alongside people that I love working with? On, Dodge, it was Gracie Otto and Corrie Chen, who I think are fantastic. And they're definitely, an exciting new wave of director coming through in Australia, and so I'm excited to work alongside them and and try and channel what they're up to, and so so I'm always trying to improve and try to find that next thing, but I would say that even the biggest actors I've worked with, we all suffer from a little bit of that, and it probably keeps us hungry and
it serves
grateful.
you. It keeps
it's not a hindrance. I don't think it's crippling. You don't sort of wake up and go, oh my God, I can't do today. Today's just not going to happen. I'd rather pretend I was sick or whatever. I'm being found out. I don't think I'm at risk of that as such, but I do come in and sort of think, oh boy, let's see what we come up with today. Yeah.
Well, that's great. You kind of wake up instead of going, I can't do it. You wake up and go, I need to do a good job.
I need to do a good job.
Yeah.
And I was just chatting before to Peter. The thing with being a director as well is you can't be, unless you're a really established big film director, you can't be good in some. You can't be good across the course of the week. It averaged out to pretty good. You need to be good in like 15-minute increments. You have to be good because it's so expensive, what the whole process and journey that you're putting everyone through. The relationship you have with the actors is so important, and with your DP and with your producers and everything. You can't have an off 15 minutes, and that's quite intense for 70-day shoot or something like that. That's the hyper focus, to have that. So that, it does that drive, means that you're never resting on your laurels. You're always trying to make things as wonderful as you can. But
And speaking of that relationship that you need to have with your actors, can we talk about Tim Minchin? Because he's such a polymath in my mind. He works in so many different sectors and so many different areas and so many different industries even. And he's one of your actors and you're his director. But he's sometimes used to being on the behind-the-scenes part of a film or TV series. What was the dynamic between you two like?
Well, we got a call from Tim to say, listen, all of my friends are auditioning or going for the show, and I think it could be fantastic. And so he said, can I have which never happens, but he's like, can I speak to you and your producer? And I was like, sure. And I didn't know Tim. I think I maybe met him once or twice, but wasn't a close friend or anything like that. And he just said, I want to do something on it. And he'd made his show Upright, and he was the writer and creator, and he's very much in that way. And he said, look, I just want to come in. He goes, no one really considers me to come in and just, act in something because I come with more of an auteur sort of background. And he said, if there's something for me, could I have a look and a read? And of course we had, we're instantly like, absolutely, let's find something for you. But it was interesting because he was extremely respectful of the process, and he didn't need to be the big personality on set or anything like that. He was very much, to me and everything. He was like, yes, sir, yeah, let's go for it, and all this sort of stuff. And he'd come in, he was working with very, very good actors on that he thought were wonderful, David Thewlis. And we'd sometimes do a line run, and he'd go, okay, wow, these guys are turning up. And he'd go away and do his work for another 30 minutes and come back in. And so he was really, really special. But he didn't see his position as needing to be the jokester or the big person on set or anything. He just turned up to go to work. And I think he also fancies himself as someone who would, down the track, if not even sooner than down the track, be a director. And so he was very close, and he wanted to ask me a lot of questions. We hung out a lot on set. And, of course, I was just hoping the more time I spent with him, the more talent of his might rub off. So I was very happy for the exchange. But yeah, he was absolutely terrific, and now a dear friend too.
Was there anything about the experience of The Artful Dodger that surprised you? Anything that you experienced where you're like, oh, I didn't think that this would happen or this would come about or I would experience this kind of feeling?
The cool surprise of it was, I think probably that's come from a little bit of experience and feeling a little more, confident overall, with taking on a new project, is that I'd planned to shoot the show one way, and then we started to rehearse it with Thomas Brodie Sangster and David Thewlis. and their chemistry and their rhythm together was beautiful. It was really beautiful, and I thought, boy, the worst thing that I could do is try to come between their performance with an edit and, you know, a cool camera shot and this or that. And so when I started to see them work, it dawned on me that, you know, a lot of this stuff needs to be blocked as beautiful one-shot, you know, choreographed scenes where they're crossing each other over and the lens takes you around this way and then, you know, you're on their back for a second. That's okay because that line's all right, and then they cross over at the right time. And so we ended up, you know, having a lot of fun with those two being able to kind of, you know, drive the blocking of the scene. And normally you get someone's close-up, particularly in television, there's a close-up, there's a close-up, there's a close-up, and I realised that that would sort of be, you know, butchering their otherwise wonderful preparation, homework, and ultimately their performance. So so that was the gorgeous little surprise, and we would, you know,
That seems harder. It seems like it's more impromptu.
Well, the thing with their preparation is unbelievable. The thing that I've noticed with the really, really big, you know, successful, you know, world-class actors is their homework is unbelievable. You think that they're going to come in there, look at their size, like, forget it. They've spent, for me to shoot a scene that might only take 45 minutes sometimes, they've probably spent anywhere in the vicinity of 5 or 6 hours on it. So when I turn up, chat to them about how it's going to play, and they have a quick look through the blocking, you know, like almost like a, you know, musician in the orchestra. If you've ever seen, like, when they get a piece of sheet music for the first time, they can play it, right? They're the same. They've done their homework. They've done their 10,000 hours, effectively, you know, whatever across the course of their life. And so they very quickly get that rhythm. And then they turn up. The crew know they need to be on take one because the cast is going to be on take one. And then they have the confidence after 2 or 3 takes. And I look at them. I go, I'm really happy. Is there anything else you want? And they go, we got it. And you go, how easy is my gig? Beautiful. So, you know, that tier of talent is, you know, they don't get lazier or they don't get, you know, diva-ish or anything like that. They just get more and more pro. Their preparation gets better, and everyone lifts to those numbers 1, 2, and 3 on the call sheet, you know, and so yeah, it just made it exciting. And I tell David's only deal was he wanted me to tell him like the day before or something what the blocking might be or which ones are the one-shot scenes, 2-minute one-shot scenes. And I'd rehearse them with a Steadicam operator after work or whatever they were, because we didn't have, you know, a lot of time to shoot. Like, we never do, you know, huge amounts of time in Australia. And then we turn up and everyone had lock in, and you'd know it was a, you know, special moment. And that's like, you know, that's direct to Disneyland for a minute, and then you go back to other stuff.
Direct to Disneyland. Nice tie-in, actually. I was looking at your resume and it's very diverse. So you've got this heartwarming comedy film about a young Muslim man for Ali's wedding, which I rewatched.
Oh,
beautiful
good.
film, and so funny. Oh my God! So if anyone here who's listening or is attending this podcast has not seen Ali's wedding, please check it out. And then you've got this psychological thriller about a woman battling a cult in the clearing. How do you ensure that you don't lose your unique voice when it comes to your directing?
Well, I think I'm actively pursuing things that, you know, challenge me. I think I probably look at it more like an actor looks at a script when I'm reading it. So every actor I know, when they read, you know, something, that they're looking for what's challenging in it. You know, where is it going to take me, and what psychology or emotional space am I about to explore, and that's nerve-wracking at times. I haven't played that before. And so when I look at material, I'm looking for something that's going to take me somewhere, you know, very different. I mean, The Clearing was really hard to choose that, to say, yes, I know it was for Miranda Otto as well, playing the cult leader, you know, these, like, you know, they've got kids and they're feeding them LSD and it's awful. And I remember reading it, it stayed with the opening scene, like on the opening 2 pages, a child's kidnapped from the side of the road, you know, and I'm looking at it, I'm just going like, well, all of my spidey senses at that point is like, this is really heavy, and, you know, just go back to doing Modern Family and have a laugh and it'll be great. And so, but then I also thought, you know, well, this script stayed with me. It's beautifully written by Matt and Elise, who wrote it. And, you know, they're both, you know, kind of Australian gun writers and so on, and people that, you know, I respected a great deal. And it stayed with me, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And, you know, I was conflicted, you know, and I thought, well, they're all the reasons why you should probably jump off the deep end and explore this thing and find something out about yourself.
Not everyone would do that. Some people would go, it stayed with me because it's traumatic and I'm going to run.
I know, and it was traumatic. It was traumatic for Teresa and I think, to make it, even though Teresa's lovely, the lead actor, because, I mean, she's got 50 million kids, and, you know, she's like, you know, feeding, she's like busy and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, you know, we both kind of found the lightness to be able to navigate it. But, you know, we're all having like the sad, scary dreams along the way, and all these things that kind of go with doing that sort of project. but I liked it. I think that probably if I could, attribute the longevity that I've had now, 20 years of directing, would be that I've tried to vary the choices as much as possible and challenge myself as much as I can, move between genres as much as I can, different formats. Every project in the last few years has been more challenging for one reason or another. Not necessarily, to everybody who would watch them and go, no, that one looked pretty challenging or whatever. Just for me, there's one layer on it. There's something that I've never done before, whether it's creative or whether it's practical or logistical, or something that's drawn me to, trying to find that next advancement of the craft, from my own personal point of view.
Is there a certain film or director or moment that inspired your directing style? Because I have a quote here from the executive producers of The Artful Dodger, David Mayer and David Taylor, the Davids, who said, "You're incredibly thoughtful, incredibly prepared, with a huge sense of humour." So where did that style come from?
Where's your sense of humour is, I think, where you're going to go with that.
No.
I don't know. I mean, I thought when I was growing up, the Michael Jordan of my world, apart from real Michael Jordan, because he was Michael Jordan at the time I was growing up, was Steven Spielberg. So, this like rock star. I couldn't believe, now I'm doing it with my kids, that you can watch all of these movies in a row and they're made by the one person. You go from E.T. and Raiders, and it was just unbelievable to me, as a kid. And so, and I think that when I look back on it now, it wasn't as much as, the craft with Steven Spielberg's movies are amazing, and performances are beautiful and all that sort of stuff. They're very affecting emotionally, and you can watch them 1,000 times, all that sort of stuff. It was actually more that just they are a movie experience, and that the feeling that you get, that sort of popcorn quality that comes with that sheer entertainment of what, particularly in his early films, what was there. That was what drove me to want to do. That was why I wanted to become an actor when I was 6.5 years old, watching this stuff. So I cottoned on very early that there was sort of a painter behind the canvas, and I was like fascinated by all of that. And of course not many directing gigs for a 7-year-old, so acting was the way in. And then I've just bugged all the directors and cameramen that I worked with for 10 years, to teach me stuff. And learnt as much as I could, and started to make short films and everything else. But really, it was all subterfuge, the acting for what I wanted to ultimately do. But yeah, from there, and then of course, your taste broadened and all that sort of thing. But I think that there's a feeling that I get watching those films that I'll never forget where I was the first time I saw them, and all that feeling that I had, and that was that kind of capturing of an imagination of a young person, and then a hyper focus for the next however many decades it has been, on that one thing.
The other thing that, that capturing of an imagination is such a great way to put it, because I look at your career and I look at the creativity and the imagination that is needed in order to have the career that you've had. But I also think that creativity needs momentum. And I wondered, when have you felt that fact, that creativity needs momentum the most?
Well, do you mean in terms of being prolific and working, or do you think in terms of actually creating the piece?
In terms of being prolific, in terms of actually, getting that thing going and having that career that you've now got.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's everything. I think that like momentum is the strongest force in the universe. Once something starts, and you're so lucky if you can taste it for a second, and usually even momentum, if you're lucky to have it, it ebbs and flows and everything else. I've got the combo of things, which is that I'm so happy on a film set. I don't know anything else. I'm just so happy in that space, and I love the people I work with. I can't even express without, to the crew and to everybody, how grateful I am to them each day without choking up. We do a speech at the start of each day. Normally it's about safety and what locations we're going to and all that stuff. And I try to, bluff my way through being able to, go, man, I'm really grateful to you guys, and I start choking up. I'm just so happy to be there, right? So what that begets, pardon me, what that begets is that, I want to keep doing it all the time. I don't get fatigued and burnt out by working on project after project or things overlapping and everything. I think it's harder to juggle it with family. I'm very lucky to have, an incredible, supportive, wonderful wife who, runs our world and everything else. And I make, I take as much time as I can in any way, whether it's through pre-production, weekends, everything, to make sure that I'm available to the kids and all that kind of stuff. But it's for better or worse, like the filmmaking side of my life is my identity. It's completely wrapped up in it, and it's not when I'm on set. It's like when my feet hit the floor in the morning, I'm a director. It's every part of who I am now. So what that means is that when the opportunities come up to direct something next and next and next, and that post-production is going to overlap with the next pre-production, like, let's get it, let's go for it. And so and I think that anyone who's lucky to experience momentum in the film business, over a consistent period, you have to acknowledge you're in very rarefied air, and if you don't wake up and feel grateful for that, my goodness, so when someone calls me and I go and get another gig, I can't believe it, and so I'm like a kid again, it's the same feeling.
It's amazing. Even just chatting to you right before we came onto the stage, you're working on a project that we cannot talk about, but it seems so soon after your last project, and there's this excitement that you have around this unnamed top secret project. Just because that how rare it is to keep that momentum going.
Absolutely, and I think it builds over years too. I've noticed this when David Thewlis, who's our Fagin in The Artful Dodger, he feels the same. Like the longer that you can keep doing, I think when you're on the up, when you're you've got an overt ambition, that's probably not you at your best, to be completely honest, for a lot, because you've just got to get that thing and you've got to be focused on that. And sometimes some of the other graces that you might carry in your life, get pushed to the side because you're so ambitious and hungry. When you get to a point, I guess, where you're able to, work more consistently, and this is now starting to feel not like one thing I got to do, but this is going to be your career. The gratitude builds and builds and builds and builds and builds, and the sadness that comes at the end of each project, knowing that you're the first few, you're like, and I'll see you again, and you're like, actually, you probably won't. And that everyone works so closely together. The collaboration is so enjoyable. Everyone becomes great friends, and because you don't have a social life outside of filmmaking, it's 90 hours of your week and everything else. They are your social life, and suddenly like a tap, it turns off, and so the gratitude builds the more that you can do. It's not the other way around when you go, I've got my first job and that was great, and then from then on I just turn up. It builds and builds and builds, and so each one, and like today I go to work after we finish this chat, and I was on a night shoot last night, and you just got to hop in your step, and it's exciting, and I'm looking forward to it.
I feel like the film industry now is very different to when you were a young kid looking up at Steven Spielberg going, I got to do that. I got to be there in it. When you look at business models for movies, the metrics are varied in this new era, and there's less people in theatres, more people are streaming. Given that, how do you measure success?
It's a really good question. The film side of it's really tricky these days, because the last thing I did, the portable door for Stan, which was so much fun, Christoph Waltz and Sam Neill, it was just the best. I just had so much fun making it. And it was the first time really that I'd made a film that's an indie film. I'd made two other films, but they were very much in the classic indie model of film, that you have a cinema thing and then hopefully it sells to a streamer. This was a streamer film, and the whole thing is very, very different. It did have a very small window that they had to put it in the cinemas, but they don't really promote it to the cinemas because it's, Stan's bread and butter is not in the cinemas, it's at home, and people watch it over the Easter, holidays was when we made that film for. And so in essence, you're sort of like, well, this actually, you're kind of making it more like it's the highest end you can imagine, but it's a TV movie, you're making it for people to watch at home on the televisions, and, and of course, on that one I had big, legendary cinematographer Don McAlpine shooting it, who'd made Moulin Rouge and all these things. And so it has a big cinema quality, but ultimately, it kind of is going to be watched on someone's hopefully large and well-calibrated television. Most likely not, on their phone or something, or an iPad. So so it does change what that world is, who you're making it for, who's your audience, how long are people going to watch it for, how are they going to hear about it, all those things. And it hasn't stopped me necessarily from sort of going, okay, well, I wouldn't work in film. I very, very happily work in film, but I do need to sort of pivot what my mindset is of probably where I'd seen, films as recently as, 10 years ago, what an indie film is, a grown-up film at the cinema to go and see. They're few and far. And so that's why I'm, really thrilled to be working in, limited series. Probably as a director is a bit of a jewel in the crown at the moment, I would say. Fabulous actors are drawn to them, wonderful scripts, and you get to really see a big character arc through over in 6 hours or whatever, 4 hours of television. And the production values are great, and you get more money to do it. So like they're pretty good. So I think that I'll probably hopefully dip back in and make more films, but I probably will have my eyes wide open to the different ways that people are experiencing that now, and hopefully keep skewing things toward the best way that it can be consumed and enjoyed.
Beautiful. And I do love like a restricted series where I know I've got to finish, because sometimes, there are seasons where you're just like, there's 7 or 8 seasons. I don't know if I have the time for this.
Well, it's also hard when someone's told you it's 5 seasons and you're like, when am I catching up?
Yeah.
When am I catching up?
When can I get to a point where I can have a conversation with you about this?
That's right,
We're
exactly.
all at different levels.
And you got to go and binge it all and everything. So and they're real. I mean, that's talk about, rare air. That sort of ongoing 8 to 10 eps of a season now, that can run for 4 or 5 or 6. I mean, that hardly happens in that prestige level. You know, HBO have a handful, and you know, Netflix have a handful, but it's really special. So you know, but being able to do limited series like The Clearing, you know, which is the start to end, you know, fully wraps itself up, you know, in the end everything pays off and it's one and done. You know, they're really special, and it is like making one long movie in that way.
Amazing. Do we have anyone from the audience who would like to ask Jeff a question? Oh, we've got one here. Hi.
My name is Jack. I lecture film and television, lecturing the actors today. I was curious, Jeffrey, in terms of your career as an actor, was there a sort of turning point when you were, I guess, chasing jobs as a director, chasing, you know, shooting productions? Was there anything attributed to it going the other way around? Like, my assumption is that you're being, you know, sort of headhunted and people are coming to you. Like, was there a shifting point? Like, could you attribute that to anything in particular?
It's a great question. Yeah, there's like little director milestones that you hit in every space. Like, I didn't pursue I didn't come at directing because I had this wonderful like sole vision, my script, I'm going to make this film come hell or high water and all that. I came at it in a very pragmatic. I'd been on set a long time, but I didn't have a unique directorial voice. I knew how a set ran. I could, you know, shoot the day, work well with actors, but I didn't have anything unique about me. I was really coming in to copy what the director had done on the earlier episodes of the show and do my best version of that, you know. So I came at it that way then, and I was really young, so I didn't have much life experience beyond, you know, what, you know, any kid does outside of work, and then the fact that I'd done the acting stuff, you know. So yeah, so at 20 or, you know, whenever it was, I started directing, and it was doing episodes of other shows that are very, very established as almost like a, you know, an opportunity to come in and hone it and learn. And the first opportunity that I had to set up a show was a big step, and that was the show JMC Academy, and I was offered the first episode of that show, which means as a television director, suddenly you're not copying someone else's style and mimicking, you're coming in to bring you can do it, you know, here's the keys to the car, off you go, you know. And they had to support, you know, your vision and what vision do I have, and what shows was I watching at the time, what's going to inspire how we're going to film this show, and what's the performance style, what's the music going to be like, all these things I'd never thought about or had to think about in the other form, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the pressure of it all. So that, and then after that, then you start to do like, you know, one-off. At that time, it was TV movies were the next step, and it was the Jack Irish movies with Guy Pearce, and so that was another big step. And so it's all those little things that, you know, kind of help along the way to ultimately, yeah, you get to, but even now with this recent one that I'm, you know, shooting presently, there was another big step for me to take to do that. And so I think that there are those sort of big milestone moments that hopefully further qualify you for some other exciting thing down the track that, you know, might challenge you in another way.
My name's Tom. I work in the animation and games department.
Cool.
I would really like to know, because you've worked in comedy a lot, what you would feel that Australia and probably also New Zealand, I feel is kind of similar to us, our like strongest areas are in comedy, what we do best that maybe the rest of the world, you know, could learn from. And maybe also what you'd like to see more of going forwards that you haven't seen for a while, or you think is an avenue that we could really go down.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think comedy is interesting, isn't it? Because, you know, Australia had a sort of, you know, it's had multiple, but it had a film renaissance in the early 90s when I was young and so into the, you know, the industry and everything else, in Muriel's and Priscilla and, you know, soon after The Castle and all this sort of stuff, you know. And, you know, Australian comedy, it was sort of known throughout the world. It had this unique sort of take on, you know, things that specificity made it funny. I think New Zealand is probably the best in the world, in the Western world, for specificity of culture coming through in comedy. If you look at, you know, some English, if you look at great rom-coms of, you know, the Brits from, you know, the 90s, if you look at Four Weddings and everything, that was so specific to funny British comedy, but that specificity travelled throughout the world. And so I think when you can sort of, you know, if you go broad with something that maybe you try to be universal with something, and it's sort of like, yeah, that's good. You could tell that story anywhere, but it didn't kind of give me a little insight. And so maybe Australian comedy, when it's at its best, Colin from Accounts, you know, it's sort of like, you know, it taps into an Australian something. It's not Australiana and it's not, you know, whatever, but it's unique to a time, and it's unique to, you know, kind of what, you know, what we're sort of outputting, I guess, in that way. In terms of, you know, what I'd like to see more of and what's ahead, I think that, you know, there's ultimately, the best advice, and this wasn't the case, 6 or 7 years ago, but, if you're a creator, there's a pathway now for big ideas to actually be made in Australia. So we used to be able to tell great stories within a very small confine. If you think of things like, The Slap is absolutely brilliant. It's very suburban, shot in and around Melbourne, not a huge budget, but enough to make a good sort of drama. Rake, when I worked on that, was the same. It was fabulous actors, all shot in and around Sydney for, in the bigger picture pittance. Now, you have all of access to all of those wonderful and talented, actors or whatever it might be, but you can give it a big, grand scope, and you can actually get financed for it in Australia. The Artful Dodger is co-created by Jim McNamara. It's his first showrunning gig, and it was like tens of millions of dollars. I don't even know what the budget ended up being. It was huge. And he had this big, grand thing. He wrote this beautiful pilot that attracted all these world-class actors, and that would be unthinkable that an Australian would write The Artful Dodger, 10 years ago. Like the ABC couldn't have funded a BBC co-pro, maybe, I don't know, But so now I would just urge that, it's okay to have a big idea. You don't have to make it your first thing or whatever, but I, know that the industry has a, the buyers, the streamers, all that sort of stuff. They do have a taste for stuff that can travel internationally. It can be specific to Australia, but it can hit a big goal, and that's what we certainly tried to do with The Clearing and with Dodger.
I'm Madeline. I'm also one of the acting students. Obviously, a director is a big integral part in the pre-production of a show or film or whatever the project is. I was just wondering what your main inspirations are in order to transport yourself into the world you're building. Like, do you listen to music, or is it artwork and that sort of stuff?
Oh, that's a great question. I bet you do the same. But yes, music is huge. I can't even begin to block a scene or draw unless I've got a playlist sorted for what the thing is. And the more different the playlist is from the last show, the more excited I am. But I can't go back to the same piece of Vivaldi over and over. I've got to change it up, So, kind of changing, that, I go, okay, now you need to look at it through this space a little bit more is really important. I'm a bit like, it's probably annoying to most people, but I like everything to be just so. So, if I'm cluttered or I'm thinking of other things, then the creativity doesn't really flow. So I like to sort of, have my little routine that I'm sort of set up. I'm a bit old school, so I've got, beautiful pen and paper when I do my work and all that sort of stuff, and do all my drawings and storyboarding and all that sort of stuff. So I try to create an environment that's conducive to, whatever my creative journey is with it. The other thing that I've found is that I like to read things over and over and over and over and over and over more times than I used to before I start doing all my planning. And I find that, if you rush to the execution, so in your case, if you're just learning the lines and I'm building that scene, I've got that scene, I've learnt it, terrific, great, got a great memory, but that's not, performing the scene. The more, don't worry about learning it. If you just read it and read it and read it and read it, and suddenly it's like a piece of cake to learn. The equivalent for that in my case is that then it's so obvious how I would shoot the scene because I know what it's actually about. It's not like, that's a cool shot. Like, who cares if it's a cool shot? It doesn't matter. You're not telling the story, and whose psychology, whose perspective are you in, and who's the point of view, and where's the point of view, Is it subjective or it's objective? All those things become really easy once you've just, read it over and over and over. So, I've got lots of little things that I try to do, and little routines and little anal retentive, processes and stuff that, help me feel like I'm, giving myself the best chance to, be creative and start something. But it's also like pacing yourself as well. I think there's, when you're nervous and you're starting out, you don't know where you should be at each point. Let's say you're about to do a play or something like that. Should I be off book on day one? Do I trust myself that I don't need to be and I'll be okay by week 2? You know what I mean? It's those sort of things. And the more I do it now, and I think I try to, because ultimately too, everyone's stressed during pre-production when I work, and everyone's doing they're all frazzled, there's never enough money, and everyone's stressed. And, no matter how much money you've never got enough to make the show that, everyone wants to make. So, but I always realize that if I'm just nice and calm and I'm listening to everybody and taking everything on and everything, then everyone picks up on that vibe as well. So I just go, we'll get there. We've done this before and all that stuff. So yeah, that's it.
I'm Ben, and I'm an acting student as well. And my question was, regarding people getting more and more tired of, the big Hollywood franchise machine and, the growing success, international success of Australian films, along with your own experience working both here and in America. Do you think that there's a future in which Australian cinema could sit with, on the same level as Hollywood and the UK in terms of like mass consumption and acclaim?
Well, definitely we've got the talent to do it. I mean, if you look at, I would class, in the ANZ side of things that, Taika, by association, makes, his films in Australia with Australians. You know what I mean? Like, it's, we definitely have the talent. George Miller recently made for some unbelievable amount of money Furiosa here with, all Australian crew, production designers, all this sort of stuff. So we've got the talent to do it. In terms of, they're getting their films financed. They're Australian. They're big. They're at the absolute top of the tree. In terms of Australian productions, there's nothing, bigger than, the Thor and the Furiosas being made. So we have the capacity to do it. The harder thing is, in this climate, just hardest thing, period, is to pitch something that's original and get it financed to that sort of, degree is really hard without the backing of an existing IP, Marvel, or something else. And I think that we're glad that they're all out there, but there's, it's always exciting when you go, there's a new, fresh concept and that, could be made in Australia. So traditionally in Australia, our budget ranges haven't, been, particularly, big when it comes to, an Australian film or different sort of content or whatever. But, something like Portable Door was, in essence, by today's, standards, it's a very original concept based on a series of books, that aren't Harry Potter or anything. They're fabulous books, but they hadn't, they're not like New York bestsellers. So it felt original. We could have a take on it. And I think we raised about 20 or 25 million to make it, had a wonderful cast, travelled all over the world and, been nominated, won a bunch of prizes, all this sort of stuff. And that was an Australian film, written by an Australian, directed by an Australian, all Australian crew, mostly Australian, New Zealand cast, with the exception of, Christoph. And the Jim Henson Company were, from the States, were right behind it and helped us make it. So there is an opportunity for sure, for Australia to play in that sandbox, so to speak. And I think that, by the time that, the sort of the next generation will be very interesting to see, already if you look at the television case, what we were making shows for, 800 grand an episode, but a few years ago now, maybe 5 million an episode you can get for so if film follows that same sort of path, anything's possible.
Hi, I'm Izzy. I'm a film and television student. You guys spoke about the momentum of creativity and your pressure to, as a director, to, with budget and time schedule limitations, that you need to keep moving. How do you think that you maintain that enthusiasm to keep going and keep working on one project and avoid burnout, or pick yourself up after that burnout and keep going?
This sounds so lame, but I'm just going to say it, but it's gratitude. It's so cheesy. It's like the cheesiest answer, but it's just, it's overwhelming gratitude. I could even get like emotional just talking. It's like to be able to come in, like all you guys want to do it. So all I have to do is think about you guys and how much you want to do it, and I'm doing it. So I'm so lucky. I can't believe it. So you don't get burnt out. You just, you are tired, but you're so lucky to be doing it. So I think you pace yourself in the right way. Sometimes I've done shoots and they're a sprint, a 20-day shoot. This, presently is a 70-day shoot. It's a very, very different sort of pacing through it. To think I'd be wrapping a whole shoot this Friday is so crazy to me when I'm, 15 days or 16 days into a 70-day shoot now. It's so different, right? So you pace yourself differently, but if you're turning up, and even if it's hard, like if you go home at the end of a shoot day and it's been really, really hard, and you're thinking about it, you're like, how lucky are you that you care enough about what you do that you brought it home in that way? You're not bringing it home because you've got a horrible person you have to battle at work and all those things that a lot of people bring their work home. You bring it home because you care about it, and what could you have done better, and what can I do better tomorrow? So I haven't experienced, burnt out. I get tired. I need holiday and break every now and then, like everyone does. But no, I just feel really lucky. That's it. Cheers.
I'm feeling a lot of gratitude right now. I'm so thankful for you, Jeff. I'm so thankful for our industry that we get to have you here in Australia when you absolutely could be based essentially anywhere in the world, and that you are keeping your expertise homegrown and sharing it with people like myself and the lucky JMC students and experts that are here today with us. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Poppy.